Meeting at 9:17 a.m. on February 27th, 2020 at the Health Licensing Office in Salem, Oregon. I will now call roll. Mary Klein, I'm here. Eddie Smith. Here. Beth Iva is almost here. Sarah Taylor, not here. Christine Morales. Here. Kelsey Fisher. Here. Lynette Pettibone. Here. Okay, great. Members, during the course of the meeting, please wait to speak until recognized by the chair. Once you've been recognized, please state your last name. Audience members are asked to sign in on the audience roster. Public interested parties' feedback may be heard during the public interested parties' feedback period, if indicated on the agenda, which it is today. Everyone is asked to use appropriate language, manners, and protocols when conducting board business. This meeting is called to order. And then when Beth comes in, we just say Beth is coming in now?
Yep.
Okay. So, do I read this? Or
well, the first item on your agenda is approval of the agenda.
Okay.
This is Kelsey. I move to approve the agenda. Mrs. Wendy, I second it.
A motion has been made and seconded. I will now call roll.
Motion has been made and seconded. I will now call roll. Wendy?
Aye.
Christine?
Aye.
Kelsey?
Aye.
Lynette?
Aye.
Meredith? Aye. Okay, great. So that's passed. Introductions. I'm guessing that's you.
Hi, I'm Lynette Pettibone. I'm a licensed midwife in Oregon and Washington. I have my own practice. I'm a solo practice, home birth midwife. And I'm here to serve on the board.
Where are you based, Mrs. Wendy? Where are you based out of?
Hi, Wendy. I live in Tigard, Oregon, and my practice is mostly based out of Vancouver, Washington.
So this is Sylvia. She doesn't know any of you, I'm assuming. She doesn't know who any of us are. So why don't we go around and we'll all kind of tell a little bit about who we are and what we do.
Okay. I'm Christine Morales. I'm the lead midwife for the Certified Nurse Midwives at Salem Hospital.
And I'm Wendy Smith. I'm an OBGYN, and I'm an OBGYN hospitalist at Legacy Emmanuel Hospital, full-time, and I've been on the board since 2012, 13, I don't know.
2017.
2000, oh, that was my update.
That was, yeah, so it would have been 3 years prior to that,
Yeah,
so like
yeah.
2014-ish. Quite some time.
I'm Meredith. I have a home birth practice in McMinnville and Salem area. Both places because I live in McMinnville and my partner lives in Salem, so we have small practice in those areas. And I've been on the board about a year or so, and I just recently was appointed, or whatever you call it, to this chair position, so I'm obviously still figuring that out.
Kelsey Fisher. We know each other. I'm a home birth midwife in Portland, and I've been on the board since 2016.
Sammy Patnode, policy analyst, health licensing. We met earlier.
And I'm Bob Bothwell. I'm the regulatory manager here in the office, and I've been here for 9 years.
We met earlier as well. I'm Heather Fogelsong. I'm an attorney with the Oregon Department of Justice, and I hold HLO and its boards.
So I'm Sylvia Donaldson. I'm the director here. I've been here about 11 years. And then there's a whole bunch of staff in the back. Not that you need to know who all of them are, but there's a bunch of staff back there. So they're here to listen and observe. And then some of them work on cases. Some of them work on the internet. You know, probably have corresponded with Maria. She's the one running the system right there. And then Paige is the assistant next to her, the one that helped you with the paperwork.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
Okay. So, number 4, administrative rule deliberation, risk assessment indications. Somebody else presenting this, or
Sammy's got it. So
great.
you should have, and if you're a paper, I'm a paper person. I don't like those little computers. But on your computer, if you get to the policy section, and then Sammy will actually have the rule and have what your 3 topics are.
So there was some confusion following the last meeting about gestational diabetes medications, and I was unclear, but I think I've now unraveled the weave of the web. Basically what I think, and me and Mary had a conversation about it, and partially Kelsey had brought this
It's
up.
my fault, yes.
Not your fault, but I think it was something that was missed, whether it be on the board's part or my part or whatever. But having mom with gestational diabetes on oral medication or insulin in the transfer of care. And it actually wasn't in transfer of care prior to your new rules, and it's not in there now. So it's been totally missed for years. Yeah.
It wasn't in consult before?
It falls under consult, this is Wendy, I mean, it falls under consult now because every single gestational diabetic actually falls under consult according to these rules.
Yeah,
Because of any medication?
It actually even says well-controlled.
Yeah,
If you
it does.
read how
Yeah.
it is written, it says well-controlled diabetes is a mandatory consult.
Yeah.
So any diabetic, ergo, seems to be a mandatory consult.
But we did have, in our draft, we had diabetes requiring oral meds or insulin as an indication to transfer, and it passed.
I thought so
Yeah.
too.
Well,
I
Yeah.
think so too.
That
I think
maybe.
I think
don't
it was
know.
erroneous if it got left out. It was supposed to.
But it
be
wasn't
there.
in the proposed rules, or the second proposed rules that I found.
I know.
And it wasn't in the permanent rules.
I feel like we absolutely we've discussed it for sure.
We did. We voted on it separately.
I remember because when I came on, you guys had already talked about it and done all the research on it, and I was questioning it, and you know, like, came back with all the information that you've been looking up, et cetera, that the outcomes were similar, even if it was well controlled, et cetera, and it was definitely there,
Yeah.
but I guess, so.
Well, it's not there now.
It's
Where
not
would
there
you
now, so what we need to do is, we can't just like put it back in, right? We have to
We'll have to follow,
have a
do the rulemaking
process
process.
of doing that. And since we're already doing these other few that we left out, in the interest of not delaying the whole thing, the whole rules, right? Like, we just adding it to that? Is that what you're?
Yes.
That's what we're doing.
That'd be my recommendation. But I could do temporary rule if it was an emergency.
This is Wendy, you know, the other thing that in reviewing this again this week, I realized is not in here that I actually really thought we had discussed was proteinuria. So it would be an antepartum indication for consult as new proteinuria. I feel like we discussed that because I remember saying, well, the outcomes associated with new proteinuria are you know, similar, can be similar to that for preeclampsia, and I feel like we discussed it and it's not
You guys
in
did
here.
definitely discuss it. I just don't know that you landed on that exact language.
Okay. I don't see anything about proteinuria in here.
Yeah, there's nothing about it in the rules, and I think that we just left it as preeclampsia.
But it's not. I mean, I
Acknowledge
think,
the,
no,
like,
I mean,
shifting definitions of how we diagnose it.
yeah, I feel like that is a miss.
I feel like it's also a tricky thing to write specifically because if somebody, I'm not consulting for everyone with a trace.
No, that I agree, and I think it's hard because it's a moving target with diagnoses, although I think you can always safely say, you know, persistent 2+ or protein to creatinine greater than 0.3 or 24-hour urine collection greater than or equal to 300. I mean, I think you can, at least in this time, say that. That should be an indication for consult. I don't know. I mean, I agree it's hard because there are specific criteria that may not be in the future, although those are pretty solid right now.
So what does it say now? In the actual transfer, it just says preeclampsia
Yeah.
or eclampsia,
Yeah.
and then indication.
And hypertension, and there's nothing else
Right.
with proteinuria. I mean, there's reflected kidney disease as a, as a pre-existing condition, but that's not really what we're talking about. Can I make a move to put this on our conditional
Yes,
list?
so let's first,
Maria, can you switch the screens? Oh, sorry. When you get back, yeah.
let's first, so do you guys want the gestational diabetes requiring insulin or oral medications under antepartum transfer? Is that accurate?
Well, that was like another thing I think we were going to talk about, because the MANA data,
So let's talk about that, and then I'm going to put proteinuria on my list, but let's do that one first.
yeah. If no one, I mean, if I'm the only one who's interested in it, it might not be worth it, because it won't pass, but.
Interested in what?
Well, because we had drafted it as, like, the evidence that we had looked at suggested that gestational diabetes, whether it required insulin or oral meds, like the risk was equivalent. And so we had written it as an indication to transfer for oral meds or insulin. But the MANA data suggests that we listened to, like, that day suggested that there wasn't an increased risk with people on oral meds. And so I was interested in leaving requiring oral meds within the consult. Yeah, based on listening to the presentation that we did that day.
We have Beth joining us at 9:29. Hi.
So this is Wendy. I mean, my one thought about that, one of my thoughts about that is that current data is that insulin is the gold standard for all gestational diabetics at this moment.
Right.
And so oral medication at this moment is only used for people that decline insulin for some reason or another, which puts those patients at a higher risk level because they are not on gold standard treatment, which to me says that that's not an appropriate candidate for out-of-hospital delivery.
I mean, that is the reason why we wrote it in the first place. But if the risks aren't elevated in the out-of-hospital data set, that was why I brought it up at that point. Like I said, if I'm the only one who's there, then
I don't think that, and this is when in my opinion, the MANA data set is not an adequate interpretation of risk for this population of women that are high risk. So I would, not want to use that as our, and I don't think there's enough data. I mean, I think what the data suggests right now in the obstetrical literature is that outcomes are better with insulin, and so again, I just feel like that negates the use of oral medication, because I think you can have people declining oral insulin so that they can deliver out of hospital, and then you're not getting a fair, I think, view of the risk for outcome. I mean, I think that's my.
What's the size of the MANA? Whereas MANA might not reflect the same thing you're talking about. I mean, it's reflecting people that are having home births in this country, and including this state. So, I mean, it's going to be a smaller sample size in general, but can we look at it? Like, how big is the sample size? What's the difference? Do you have that all there? Because I already did all that.
It's not really this with me.
I don't even know that, because it was just it was in like another presentation that we were listening to, and it was sort of like a side note. Yeah, that we listened to before we wrote it.
That was going to say changes PowerPoint
Yeah,
based on the MANA data.
yeah,
So I have the PowerPoint.
yeah. I don't know
If the
it
slide
got
actually
its own
says.
slide. Yeah, I don't know if it's in the. It's, like I said, I don't necessarily feel like we need to waste a bunch of time on it. But I do think we should have some kind of rule.
Right, it shouldn't just be a void, it should be
I mean, I think the
listed.
school seems appropriate to transfer them if they're
Yeah,
just on an oral application.
it's what we had agreed, I mean, we did vote on it. We just didn't make it into the official copy.
I mean, it's always been an indication to consult in my experience here and elsewhere, and I've been satisfied with it like that. And I think we also have, not unanimous, of course, but like in general, a more compliant population who's like really motivated. I mean, a lot of them are motivated for doing a lot more nutritional
Well, and
support to like reduce their risk, which sometimes doesn't work, you know, but oftentimes it does, and I wonder if it makes a difference then if they're doing all of these other lifestyle and exercise, you know, and dietary changes, and they need a little bit of medication. Is that a different outcome than somebody who's not at all? Or is that quantified at all in the data?
I think you can't determine that. I just don't think there's enough information to determine that. I think the bottom line is that, you know, probably the greater risk is to the fetus and not to the mother, right? I mean, it's the outcomes related to sugar controls probably right during labor, because the greater risk is that the kid's going to need glycemic support and ongoing sugar evaluation. And I mean, the data I found suggested that up to 5% of these babies are going to go to the NICU at term for sugar management or bilirubin control. And so I think that I just don't think there's adequate numbers to support that. And I think, I mean, to me, a 5% risk of needing high-level care is important enough that it, you know, and it, I don't know. I just don't. I'm looking at the MANA stuff for that right now.
Right now.
I don't know what
You know what, it is in pre-existing conditions.
well, that's a different thing though.
Right, so I'm just,
Yeah, if you already have diabetes that requires some kind of medication,
okay, so we still need to
that's a
decide.
separate, yeah. It should be in the antepartum transfer.
Is that where you want it?
Well, I think that's
Or
what
you
it
still
is.
kind of follow?
And we previously voted, but there was a error of some sort and it didn't end up in the final.
Yeah.
But we did retain there's still a requirement to consult if somebody has gestational diabetes or blood sugar dysregulation that's well controlled with diet and lifestyle.
That's still an indication of consult?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So somebody needs to make a motion on this, and then we need to
No,
vote on
you
it?
just tell me
and
when
then
you- No,
we
you
need
just-
to, like, open it
You
up.
can make a
public
motion at the
comment,
end of the rules to approve the rules, proposed rules. Right now, what you're doing is wordsmithing. So you just
Yeah.
need to tell her where it's at, she'll enter it
You
in.
want an antepartum transfer? That's what I'm hearing, but I'm just confirming.
Well, that's what we previously voted for, correct? Was an antepartum transfer.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know that we all agreed, and we have a new person that wasn't here to vote for that, so.
I don't think we had separate votes on diabetes.
What's that?
I'm not sure we actually.
We did, I asked to.
So we're going to.
That might be how it got left out. Yeah,
Kelsey, do you mean that it was voted on
Apparently
at the
separately.
meeting when you were adopting rules after public comment at that period of time? Or was it voted on previously when you guys were talking about rules? Do you have a sense of that?
We had like an official vote. It was one of the like controversial topic ones. It was the first round of voting we did where we like adopted all the rules except these, and then it was one of the separate ones we voted on.
So if it was something that was voted on, depending on when that vote happened, if I'm imagining it correctly, then it was voted on as a rule to be put in place.
Yeah.
And then it was just left out of the editing draft that was submitted to Secretary of State. Does that
My
sound
understanding
right?
of what happened.
Should we go back and listen to the record to
Maybe-
make sure that we have it correct?
I'm thinking if there was a vote on that by the board, then we, maybe between this meeting and next meeting, can go back and look at that, listen to that tape, find out what the vote was, find out what the wording was that was voted on, and then figure out whether we need to, what we need to do from there. Because there were different meetings where different votes happened, and so I want to be able to go back and assess whether we need to go back and re-vote on it, or what happened.
So if they did vote on it and they did pass it and it was our error in not getting in the draft,
And there's proof of it.
and there's proof of it, how do we get Secretary of State to get updated?
I just have to just do it again.
We would just
It is what it
refile
is.
it, because it's already been adopted by the
Here are the
board. We'd refile
things
it,
that you guys
most
voted
likely.
on. These are the separate items that you voted on, those 3 meetings. Listed,
So it's not in there.
is not in here.
So it sounds like we'll,
But I'm happy to add it in. I mean, I could do a temporary rule, it's an emergency.
Well, add it to the rule currently.
Right.
And then between now and when you guys meet next, we'll do a little research, trying to figure out and listen to, because now we know exactly what we're looking for. So Sammy can do some digging and try and find out if you very specifically did vote on it.
Okay.
But for now, we'll get it in the draft rule, because obviously if we don't have proof that it was actually voted on, we're still going to need to add it to the current rule.
I'm just looking at the MANA data. I mean, there was a 0.8% rate of gestational diabetes that delivered, and they basically say you can't base any of their
Okay,
outcomes on that.
great.
Maybe because we're just so good at helping people to manage it out there.
Okay.
I mean,
No, this is any diagnosis, actually. It wasn't even, it doesn't even specify.
Oh, that one is just for
Yeah,
gestational
no, it just says
diabetes.
gestational diabetes, period, doesn't specify the meds. And since, 75 or so % are without meds, hard to.
So we're adding it to indication to transfer antepartum?
Yes.
Okay, should we move on to the next thing
yes.
that we're deliberating about?
Can I
Oh,
ask
proteinuria.
a proteinuria question?
Yes, it's almost, yes.
How do I raise that as a new issue?
This,
Do I need?
this is wordsmithing, so you're not like, you don't have to stay in this lane. This is just a general idea of what you guys want to talk about. But if something else comes up, you're in rulemaking, you can,
So
You can throw it in.
do I say,
Yeah.
this is Wendy, and I would like to propose that we address proteinuria as a indication for consult, or?
Did we ever address it before?
I feel like we did, but I'm
There.
not totally sure.
I don't remember.
You don't remember? I remember, but I would not ever swear to it, so.
Another thing that I wanted to address is we have active cancer listed in both antepartum and pre-existing, but it's really confusing to have it as pre-existing. I take that to mean somebody has cancer and they get pregnant, that's out of our scope, but the way people are reading it is if anyone has ever had any history of cancer, that is an indication to transfer. So I think we need to either remove it from the pre-existing and historical conditions or clarify somehow.
Well, active, it says, this is Wendy, it says active cancer. I mean, that means
That is
active lymphoma,
But
active.
but because it's in the pre-existing and historical conditions, people are taking it to read that somebody had active cancer at some point.
So can it just be like a clarification in the frequently asked questions kind of thing versus?
Can't it be active cancer at time of pregnancy? I mean, I don't.
But
Yeah.
we have that too, because it's also in the antepartum indications for transfer. So I think we could just maybe remove it from the pre-existing and historical.
I don't read it
Or
that way at all.
I understand. I don't think any of us read it that way when we wrote it, but I've gotten a lot of people freaking out about it.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were at a meeting together.
It's a big issue.
Uh-huh. Well,
I don't even think
So
we
what do you
wrote that
suggest-
one.
what do you
I think
suggest
it was
adding
already
to it?
in there. We just
Yeah,
kept
it was.
from
Well,
before.
the complication is that we didn't have this distinction between antepartum and pre-existing and historical before. That's new this draft. And so we kind of teased apart which should be in which and which should be in both.
Right.
And that's why people are getting confused about it.
If we took it out of pre-existing, would that make it too narrow?
I
can't
don't
understand
think
why.
so, because it's still an antepartum.
If you still have cancer while you're pregnant.
Yeah, if you have active cancer during pregnancy, that's a transfer.
Well, I mean, why aren't they freaking out the same way about active or chronic renal disease? Because that's something that also could get better. I mean, I just feel like they're not reading it the way it's intended to be read. And
Well, because the words active or chronic, to me, means like you have active or ongoing renal disease versus like a history of renal disease.
Well,
means
I
you
mean,
can never
but
get
it's the same thing though. It says pre-existing and historical conditions.
active or chronic.
So anybody could say, well, I had active renal disease when I was 3 years old and now it's resolved.
Right.
So I mean, I understand the issue, but I think it's really being, too literal without understanding the intent of what we're saying when we say active.
I mean, that's the complication though, right? If you're not here and you're not like part of this, understanding the intent of it, you're just a licensee reading the rules. You can't read the spirit of it. You can only read the letter of it.
Well, what's our intention?
I think the intent is you have actively ongoing issue.
So why is it a problem to remove it from history and just?
Well, because what it could potentially do is allow for a patient to kind of sign up for care, start care, and then get asked this question later and not get risked out immediately. I think that's the intent of saying.
But our scope of practice is people when they are pregnant. So we're going to ask this
And there's no way
at
really.
our intake. Like, I don't know, unless it's a new diagnosis, it's not going to come up later.
Well, that's why I don't understand why this is a problem here. If it
Because
says,
people are interpreting it as somebody has had cancer.
If you ever
At
had
any
active
time.
cancer, then you are risked out of care.
Yeah.
Can you add the word current to the beginning? Current active cancer?
I mean, it seems like we shouldn't have to qualify active, so we should either, because active means like happening right now, but if we're, but the question is are we really losing anything by taking it out? Just
Right, that's the question.
Do we need to try to like wordsmith it and manipulate that one thing to make it more clear, or what's really lost if we just take it out and have it?
And have it in Antwerp.
And have it where it's most relevant, which is right now.
I mean, if
Because
your
there's a
intent-
lot of particular ways you could go with that, like, somebody could have had active cancer in the last year and still like actually not be a good candidate because of what kind of damage to her body happened from the treatment that she might have had, or like sequelae from what particular cancer it was. So we can't go through and itemize all of those things, right?
Well,
like active cancer within the last 6 months, or active, like it's,
Cancer.
it seems like like it either just shouldn't be there or be, like add one extra word. Like we can't quantify with so many different kinds of cancer and what the treatments are and the sequelae to their body.
Would you want to move it into consult because of that reason? Like, maybe they had it and then you want to look more into what
I mean, like
treatments
somebody
you
had
have.
breast
and
cancer
what's
like 10 years ago and they had a mastectomy and there's been no,
There's no
like,
need to
why, I don't think they need to do it
Right.
that. I mean, probably they do because they're going like back for checkups, with the provider that treated them for
I think that when we split the like antepartum into antepartum and historical, that like we didn't necessarily step back and look at it again, from that.
That's fine. I think as long as it's not interpreted as somebody who develops cancer in the antepartum period, you know,
Right.
and as long as the consideration is there for someone with active cancer
Like
while
going
they are
into it.
pregnant, I don't care. I think that's fine.
And I think your point is good, though, about the active or chronic renal disease, that might be better.
in
in
antepartum as well. And actually, in doing that, you could we could add including proteinuria, right? I mean, I actually think that should be a part of that.
In transfer?
In,
Consult.
well, that's true. Now that, you're right, I want that in consult. So fine, that would be, I don't care. Put it in antepartum as well. I don't care. That's fine.
Okay, so we're taking out active cancer out of indication to transfer pre-existing. We're keeping it in prenatal. And are we also moving the renal? Where does it say that?
So move that to antepartum?
Active or chronic renal disease, like, give me more direction.
I mean, chronic renal disease
What
is a
renal
pre-existing condition, though, that would compromise pregnancy. And that's, it's pre-existing. I'm learning all about renal disease right now, and let me tell you, it's pretty
Bad.
scary.
It's bad.
I mean, like, there's more than I knew before about, like, wow. Thinking about, like, postpartum hemorrhage, too, and, like, hypovolemia and the kidneys and, like, how quick, like, necrosis happens there.
Well then, so I guess what's
Whoa.
the intention of this? Just the way that we have it worded, if it's in like a historical section and we're using the word active. I know. Like,
Right,
that's just a
so-
little
It's true.
befuddling.
So what about chronic renal disease there
And active in.
and active in prenatal?
That sounds good to me.
We think it gives good employment health for both of them. Still keeps them
Right,
pretty-
it's not gonna rule out somebody that has
Yeah.
like pulmonary.
Right, because that wouldn't be chronic.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if they've got, I mean, I think you have like 75% damage of the nephrons of your kidney before it's considered active or chronic renal disease, you know, a little bit different. So it's like, that's a significant compromise, and then putting pregnancy on top of it seems reasonable that it's a contraindication. So intrapartum, are we adding that on to something, or is it just separate? Was anything listed there for renal disease already? There's hypertension.
No.
hypertension,
For antepartum?
For antepartum.
You have abnormal hepatic and renal function test and then the other one. But you don't have anything in there.
What number is renal function test?
It's not so much.
You know what, actually, that may be the place then, abnormal hepatic or renal function test, including proteinuria. Maybe
I
that's where we,
mean, maybe that's where we included it,
Right.
is we just
I wonder, right,
thought that covered that base.
I wonder,
Without
yeah,
having to try to put a number on it.
right, but I feel like,
Maybe calling it out a little bit.
yeah, I mean,
It feels like one of those things that the diagnostic criteria changes, and so you don't want to be too specific about it, and you also don't want to say any kind of trace protein in the urine is like a consult even.
I mean,
Obviously.
I know we don't want to use the word significant, but I don't know, including,
Then that leaves it up to interpretation, which is maybe fine in this
Yeah.
case.
I mean,
You ought to know how to be assessing for preeclampsia
But
if you're
we,
a birth
why
provider.
write a rule that isn't enforceable either? Like,
well,
Yeah.
it's one of those, I think it's one of those rules that if somebody, had ongoing 2+ proteinuria that was ignored and then has florid preeclampsia or seizes or something, and we go back to it and say that should have been addressed, it's one of those issues that we are expecting. The expectation is that someone would have recognized that as an issue. So again, you can't legislate common sense, and I mean, so saying the word proteinuria, I think, does allow for somebody to make some educationally based decision-making around it. I mean, doesn't it?
I mean, I like that, like, looking at this, like, the spirit of this is not in, like, making things to punish people. The spirit is, like, having a standard of practice that's safe. So if someone's reading it and they're like, oh, if it influences them at all or puts it in their mind, then that's a non-quantifiable.
But rules are not practice standards.
Right. So what do you suggest? Not having it in?
I mean, we already have the consult for abnormal testing. I just feel like it's very prescriptive, especially since we already have transfer for preeclampsia and eclampsia.
Yeah.
And those definitions and diagnostic criteria seem to be fairly rapidly shifting right now. I'm hesitant to try to put
anything
specific
specific.
in.
Okay, I mean, I
mean, maybe, Wendy, like, if you have papers.
I do have papers, and I thought I
have them.
Put them in. I really feel like I need to talk about this. But
About other symptoms of preeclampsia?
yeah. I mean, there are recommendations for testing. There is associated intrauterine growth restriction. I mean, there is a much higher rate of evolution to preeclampsia. So, I mean, there are data on this
What would be the benefit then of consulting?
I have two.
Because we're still going to be watching for those other things.
Because it would it would make clear the recommendation for antepartum testing. I mean, I don't think that that's necessarily well known, but it is a practice. I mean, that is a practice standard in obstetrics, that with new significant proteinuria, antenatal testing starts and ultrasound.
And how are we watching for that? Because my understanding is that I've read the research that doing like dipping pee at every visit is not considered evidence-based. So the only reason as a midwife that I would check proteinuria is with other signs and symptoms of preeclampsia.
I would have to look into that. I mean, we do still dip protein, so I would have to come back to you with evidence. I'm not familiar. That's our practice standard still.
Yeah. Well, it's not considered evidence-based, so that's not always true in the midwifery community.
Yeah, when I did a centering pregnancy group in Philadelphia, they had compiled all this research about that, exactly that. It wasn't evidence-based, and so we didn't do it.
Yeah, that was my recollection of.
But that was
doing
usually
routine.
Well, I think Sammy just pulled up that study, I guess, so that does sort of at least give proof that we did talk about this.
I have two studies.
Maybe could you send those out to
I'm
us
not
again,
totally
and we
crazy.
I
can
will be
revisit
happy to.
it after we've had time to read some.
I know,
We
right?
talked about a lot of things.
Yeah, it's in there.
Does that sound okay for us to all read some evidence and talk about it again next meeting? Preferable. When we have kind of a level playing field of what we're looking at?
Okay, so did we decide though to move the active renal disease to the pre-existing and antepartum? And then now this is an additional thing that we're doing, or we're putting the whole thing on?
And then the chronic renal disease as
Stay in pre-existing?
That was my understanding.
Okay.
I like that idea.
That's my understanding.
I mean,
Okay,
can't then you say active renal disease would also be proteinuria? I mean, then you're, that's the problem. Now you've sort of got this new interpretation of that too. I mean, that also could be misinterpreted.
I feel like the things that we're looking for, our bases would already be covered for what you're really trying to get at, but you seem like you want the word in the rules.
Which one? Which word?
Proteinuria.
Well, I'm happy to look at the evidence. I feel like the evidence, once you have proteinuria, suggests that this, at minimum requires consult. And I think the question is, how is midwifery gonna interpret active renal disease, right? I mean, is proteinuria active renal disease? I mean, I would argue it is active renal disease, but now that puts it in a transfer category. So I'm actually a little bit more, I would almost be more willing to put active renal disease in a mandatory consult category. Unfortunately, I think it would require, more than just a consult to a midwife. I mean, I think that it would be one of those more prescriptive. I mean, to me, that's more the intent of what we're saying, is that, we don't necessarily think that all active renal disease, depending on how it's interpreted, needs to be mandatorily transported, and so
maybe move active renal disease to consult?
Antepartum.
Antepartum consult?
And chronic renal disease too. I mean, I do think chronic renal disease needs to be a transfer. Active renal disease depends on how you interpret what that means.
What do you want it to mean?
Well, I mean,
Do you see how these things don't flush
I know,
out?
I
That's why I'm
agree.
asking you specifically.
I agree, yeah.
What would you like it to mean? And we can write it.
I mean, I don't know, if you move active renal disease to consult, I mean, then we've got the secondary, abnormal renal function test, although you can have active renal disease. I mean, you can have active renal disease B. I think active renal disease should actually go to consult. I just think it has to be, I think this is one that we say needs to go to physician.
Or a provider with prescriptive privileges.
I think it needs to go to a physician.
Well, I mean, we already have it in our definition of consult, that the consult has to be someone with knowledge and experience handling the condition. So I don't think there's going to be another midwife that's going to be an expert on kidney disease.
Yeah.
So I think that if somebody did try to consult with another midwife, that would be obviously not the appropriate consult.
I would be a little bit concerned about it going to a naturopathic physician, so potentially.
Because of their unfamiliarity with pregnancy, or?
Well, because I think, I'm not sure, but I mean, I don't know. Because they're, I don't know. Maybe. I mean, if you had a naturopath that was just looking at their renal condition, right, and then not being familiar with how it impacts pregnancy, then yes.
But there could be one that was a specialist in that, maybe.
There's a number of naturopathic physicians who are also midwives, who would then have multifaceted experience.
Right. Yeah, I guess it
I think
depends on
this
where they
needs to
work.
go to an MFM, personally.
Active.
I think it's nuanced enough that it needs to go to an MFM.
How is it more nuanced than the current rule, which requires consult for abnormal renal function tests?
Well, I think that unfortunately, it's probably not. I just think it's how it's interpreted. I don't know. I feel like it's a really difficult one, because I don't know that people think that proteinuria is an abnormal renal test, and I also don't, just trying to think of what other, like, when you think active kidney disease, what are you thinking of? What, Hylo? I mean, there's also lupus nephritis, right? I mean,
Right.
and any other connective tissue disorder, there's,
It depends on the
there's
cause of it.
there's multicystic and, polycystic kidney disease, and that certainly has an impact. And but I guess maybe that would be more chronic than active.
Right, and if you had somebody with Hylo, like that that has an infection as the cause, then that could be treated. If you have inflammation in the kidneys related to lupus, like it's a different scenario as far as whether it's like active kidney disease or an infection that can be treated and then you move on.
Right.
Well, yeah.
So then consult about it.
Okay. Then I would say chronic kidney disease goes in the antepartum, or the
Stays where
pre-existing
it is.
condition, and active kidney disease goes in antepartum. Consult.
Consult.
And chronic goes into pre-existing
Transfer,
That's where it already is,
which is just clarifying.
but it's, yeah.
and with no specific designation of who you consult with.
I don't think so.
And we're not adding proteinuria anywhere.
I thought we were doing research and then
Yeah.
figuring out the final way to word it next time. And then what happens after we figure out all the final way that we want to word things, then they go to public comment, all the things that were reworked just now? And then there's a whatever amount of
You guys
time.
will approve them proposed,
Okay,
and then they'll go out to public comment.
okay,
Exactly.
great. What's the next one?
Twins?
Twins. Should we do like, is there anything else that could be faster?
I
3
feel like-
cesareans with a previous
Yeah, that one might be
Yeah.
faster. You guys were just gonna move that up to transfer. Okay. You guys
Yeah,
are
I think that's
considering
what
that.
most people
I
had
think
agreed
that's
on.
what we agreed to.
That's still true.
I mean, I had opposed it before, but I'm willing to change it. I mean, my vote, that's what I'm on. Had you also? Were you the other person who?
Yeah, I feel like when we
We're
were looking at VBACs, like, if you're gonna do a VBAC after one cesarean, it's reasonable to do one after two, and this doesn't really increase much to 3, especially if somebody's already had a successful vaginal birth. And I think part of what, like, my thought was the reason for, like, there's so many circumstances that could be leading to this. Like, this is somebody's 5th pregnancy. Like, all the things that could have happened are so varied that it's hard to regulate. But also, I don't know how many people this is even impacting, so.
Right.
Well, I think that was what we really talked about, was like, this was a very, very rare situation.
I mean, I feel like if it's rare, then it makes sense to leave it in consult, but
I'm comfortable with moving it to transfer. I think that was my vote last time.
Is it anywhere? Or did
Yeah.
it just get kept out?
It's in consult, right?
It's in consult.
And then for some reason, we readjusted it. and talked about
Well,
it more.
you guys voted it down, and then in your last vote,
That's right. We
you
agreed
guys
to put it
voted
in
to put
consult, and then it
back
didn't
where it
pass.
was. Right. And the other option was to put it back where it was currently. Where it was then and where it is now.
I think.
Oh, and the reason why we didn't vote it to leave it in is because most people wanted to have it be in transfer, not, right?
I think the intention of people when they were voting were they wanted 3 or more cesareans regardless in transfer, but it didn't, the wording hadn't been set up that way, and so this didn't pass, but then we didn't want to leave a hole, so we put it back.
How would you like the wording? Let's just fix that.
Well, if people are not supportive of home VBAC after 3 cesareans with or without a previous successful vaginal birth, then we really just need to delete this,
And put it in transfer.
delete it, and just change the transfer to 3 or more cesareans. Because right now it says 4 or more cesareans.
Do you have any thoughts on it that you want to share, since you weren't here before for the conversation?
I mean, I did not review the research coming into this, but I believe that it's correct that it is reduced with a previous successful vaginal birth, and so that is someone that potentially could be considered for midwifery care. And I agree that it's probably a very small subset of the population that it impacts.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm personally for leaving it in
Yeah.
consult.
I don't see what harm it does in leaving it, but that's not my
With
question.
this language.
Well, there's sort of two different pieces, right? Because there's consult if someone's had 3 cesareans with a previous successful vaginal birth, which I am in support of. But there's also
But without
the indication to transfer is 3 cesareans without a previous successful vaginal birth. And then, yeah. And I don't know if we want to consider those together or if we can agree that they're distinct issues.
Isn't that what it says now?
That's what I'm saying, it does say that now, but if we want to take out all the people that have,
3 cesareans.
right,
And move them all to transfer.
yeah,
But some of you are fine with living in consult.
yes,
So we're unsure.
correct.
I'm just
I mean,
making sure we're
what-
super clear.
I mean, does anybody have this experience? Like, why would somebody have had 3 C-sections? Yeah, I
And,
don't know. I mean, what, you think, I think about 2, sometimes like, you had one and you didn't know you didn't know that you had a choice to have a second one, and then you had a second one, and then, or like the first one was for breech, and there wasn't a provider in your area that did vaginal breech, and then with your third one, you've like, but like, why 3? I mean, this isn't maybe appropriate conversation, because it's not research.
This is Wendy, I think the reason why 3 is because there actually is a teeny tiny little bit of data that suggests that, as Kelsey said, the risk on the third is probably no greater than the risk on the second, and the second is actually probably no greater than the risk on the first. And so, but there's nothing beyond that available.
There's no research available, because there's not enough people.
So, I mean, I'm done with this topic, because I don't know that, I think consult is as good as you're gonna get on this one.
so then maybe we don't need to change it at all.
I mean, I feel like the data is greater on 2 than 3. You know, what there is does, I mean, there's just not a lot of numbers, and so 3 doesn't look worse than 2, and I admit that, so, but.
Right, but we have like not a lot of numbers, and the mana stats about like glucose.
You know,
stuff,
honestly,
and we're
the
taking that
problem
out.
here is not sort of the risk of rupture, right? And it's really more an assessment of why these C-sections were done, as you
Right.
said. So if the first one was done because they pushed for 6 hours, you know, and then needed a C-section, you're talking about a completely different patient than had a
And then the
breech and a
second one,
repeat.
again,
And
happened
exactly.
that, and then the third one.
Right, I mean,
then it's
that's
like,
the
why are
problem,
you
is you
doing
can't,
that?
I cannot, you know, have any control over how somebody's assessing these, and
Yeah.
so.
Compounding risk.
When you
That's what it
consult,
sounds.
hopefully you're talking to someone who has the idea of indication for C-section and can relay that to a patient, and I mean, otherwise.
And isn't the other concern placentation, like agreed?
Right.
But yes, although the literature does not support that less than 4 C-section significantly increases the risk for placentation problems, right? So you're thinking that on the first one, or the second one, or the third one, but they're all the same. So where you start to see a significant change is when you get to the 4th one. And so that's why I can't do anything more than, you know, say this.
And it seems like, I mean, we already have 3 sections with no previous vaginal birth in transfer. And so it's just somebody who has a proven pelvis, who's for whatever reason also has 3 cesareans.
Wondering like what the vaginal, you know what I mean? Like if it's a vaginal delivery of like a 28-weeker.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But-
Like I'm just thinking of like the things that, like who this person would be, because I can't even really picture this.
But
I feel like
that's who it is, actually.
I feel like this person could be from a different culture, perhaps.
and that we're excluding, we're kind of being Oregon culture specific. And that it could be someone coming from a different culture who now realizes, who now has the opportunity to do something different.
Yeah. Okay. So should we just leave it? Seems like most people are okay with that.
So
We're leaving it
3
where-
cesareans without previous vaginal birth
in
and
consult.
transfer.
No, that's.
Oh, without, yeah, in consult.
And then 4 more cesarean sections in transfer. And then the 3 with a successful vaginal birth. God, it's a tongue twister.
You just passed it. You want to leave it alone.
Leaving it in consult.
So unhighlight.
Do we need to like vote on it again, or?
Nope.
We're gonna.
Where you're wordsmithing, you'll vote at the, once you are done wordsmithing, you'll vote on,
All the
but
things.
you won't do it today because you're wanting to come back with after.
I mean, the
reading
thing
it.
is, yeah, I mean, we're requiring consult for 1 or 2, so, I mean,
With-
honestly, without a, yeah,
With somebody
yeah,
who does cesarean.
Yeah.
Like.
yeah, right. So I mean, I don't.
So you're all comfortable with just unhighlighting it, leaving it alone? Okay. That one actually went pretty quick.
Okay.
Now you can talk about multiples.
Great. So, I mean, my recollection, and being someone who wasn't here for all of this, is that some people just wanted to leave it how it's just stated already. I guess that is how we left it, so that it wasn't like a void. And then Wendy and probably other people, I don't know, was like, didn't like how that was worded and wanted to come up with something that was better or more specific. So
Wendy,
that's what we're
Sarah.
doing, is talking about how to make it sound.
Or if there's, you guys can give me direction on what you want. Do you want to make the words sound different? Do you want to do co-pair?
I want
to
this,
do
yeah.
certain testing
Yeah, I mean,
in order to have this?
My preference would be that it needs to be, the consult cannot be with a community midwife that does twins.
Great.
I mean, consult needs to be with a physician that does C-sections.
So we have things that, the transfer, wasn't really controversial, right? Mono, twin-to-twin transfusion, presenting twin transverse. That's
Or higher order one.
gonna stay in transfer. Higher order multiple, yeah. And then, so now the way it reads is di twins, mono twins are indication to consult, and that's it. So if we just say indicate to consult with a physician that is like currently has hospital privileges and does C-sections, that would satisfy.
Yeah, because I mean, I think that would cover the breech first presenting twin, that would cover breech extraction potentially, and that would cover recommended testing. Because I think that that's a piece that's really missing here, and that's, in my experience, that's where we've had problems, is a failure to recognize the need for appropriate testing and monitoring.
I mean, as it reads though, the consult happens, the client doesn't have to go for a consult. It's the midwife that consults.
I know, I don't
provider,
think
so-
that.
Is that what our
like
consult
that.
rule still says?
Yeah.
I thought we-
Yeah.
So you
Do we
don't,
not
so it's not like
rewrite
you're having.
We can't, because it's not, like in the Portland bubble or a Eugene bubble,
That's right.
it's possible to get that consult, but it's not everywhere. You can't get that in Eastern Oregon, you can't get that in Southern Oregon. And so I think it's important that we have to make allowance for the midwife consulting with the provider and relaying that to the client. But we do acknowledge, we talk about like, this is what the midwife has to tell the pregnant person if the person wasn't there. So I think we put that in, saying like to try and encourage people
Was
to
not
do
present
in-person
at the
consults
consult,
with everybody there, but I don't feel comfortable trying to
legislate that, or-
to legislate that because it's not accessible.
Right. Do we legislate documentation of that consult? I
Yeah,
guess I can't remember.
It's very thorough.
It's very thorough.
Yes. You have to say
Document the
essentially,
recommendations, consultation, discussion, informed consent, and plan is what the rule says.
Okay. So can we just add, just be specific about the provider? I mean, when,
Experience with, can you say and with hospital privileges, or is that too much? I mean, that again, that leaves it open to an ND, right?
or like a retired,
Or like a retired, yeah.
I mean,
Working Center says
that's-
on that.
that's
that
why you said the cesarean privilege though, because that's not gonna include NB.
Right.
So instead of necessarily twin experience, it would be someone with cesarean. Who does cesarean delivery.
surgical.
With surgical experience with twin birth.
I mean,
I don't know.
I feel like that's making the consult a lot harder to get.
Yeah.
I think that if I feel like it's sufficient to be physician who does cesarean.
Who does cesareans?
Yeah.
Which is
Okay.
the,
Because
I mean, I think the important thing is identifying that they're a provider with current privileges.
Because that also allows people to consult in their community.
That's what's
Because-
important.
Yeah, because you might not be able to consult with someone who, does twins in your community.
Yeah.
But
I mean, the
there's
problem
people
is,
who do cesarean.
the problem is that you're, that you are, I mean, in doing that, you're leaving out the potential ability to find a provider that can provide a hospital vaginal birth in some communities.
How is that true? Because.
Well, if you're just talking to a physician in your community
Right.
who doesn't do.
Right, but if you go to, if you're never planning a midwifery birth and you go to your local OB
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
say, I'm pregnant with twins, then you're going to get the spiel to that local OB. That if they're either going to feel comfortable doing it or they're going to refer you. And I would assume that they would give that same information to someone who is their patient or someone who is a consulting patient. Why would they?
I hope they would. Yeah, no, I mean, I hope they would.
And I'm with Kelsey that I don't think that we can put in legislation requiring people to leave their community in order to get the consult.
I mean, if there's somebody in your community who's doing twins, like that's the person you're going to want to consult with anyways.
Right.
Unless they're sectioning all twins.
Right, in which case, if you're motivated, then you have a consult with somebody else, or.
Right.
I mean,
Guess
you just
not.
don't want that to be the final decision-making piece for a patient who's trying to consider what she should do with her twins. I mean, if there's a provider that,
It's not.
I know.
I mean, that's part of the documentation requirement is that you document. If you go outside the consultant's plan or recommendations, you have to document and justify that.
So you think that what you would get from that consult is somebody saying you need to have a C-section because in my experience, that's what all twins
You'd get them
do.
at least presenting that as an option.
And then you just chart that that's what they said, you talk about it with your client. And
I
then
know,
they
but what,
decide.
it doesn't mandate then that you say, oh, maybe we could go outside of the community to find a provider that could provide an in-hospital
I mean, there's
birth
also-
experience. Because if somebody thinks that their decision is either a C-section, and I know this happens, if someone thinks that their decision is, I have to have a C-section or I have to have an out-of-hospital birth, that's not fair either, so.
But that's probably true at St. Charles, in Bend.
That's probably true at St. Charles. Or,
It's true in a lot of communities.
Yeah. Just
or they
specifically there.
can go outside of their community and
Right.
have a,
If they can. I mean, there's a lot of resources and privilege to be able to.
Yep.
I know, but you're not ensuring that patients have that choice here or have that information here. So I'm just trying to understand how we can make sure that somebody has complete information that options exist perhaps within a 20-mile radius. I don't know, I just don't know.
I don't feel like that's something that, as a board, that we can regulate.
Right.
And I know that part of the comfort with keeping twins was that, like, the professional organization is working on informed consent, like a template, so that everybody can see that and know that those are options.
That was going to be
And
my point.
I think that, like, the idea behind, like, having it in a consent rule is what do we want to get from the consult? And so that's the monitoring and look for these things. And, you know, these are the risks and benefits. And that's part of informed consent, and that's part of getting a consult. And I don't know that we have the scope to do more than that.
And if vaginal birth of twins is not, I mean, you can't change the facts on the ground if it's not widely available in hospital settings in Oregon. There's not much you can do about that. If someone's birthing in Enterprise or, you know, somewhere where they are, we can't change the facts.
I mean, there's
That
maybe
in that
not-
local community, their option might just be whatever it is at the local hospital, and they're going to consult and get that information.
I was just thinking there's not much that we can do here as far as that, but like maybe there's something you can do
No,
about
well,
it,
yeah,
right?
I know, I mean,
I'll
that's
bring
right,
that
that's a
personal,
bigger,
Wendy.
well, right, I mean, that is a bigger issue, definitely, but, yeah, I mean, trying to think about how you could word that to make it a more,
I mean, I feel like saying that experience with twins is redundant because that's already part of the consult rule, that you consult with someone who's knowledgeable and experienced.
yeah, but that's
with
not
the
true,
things
yeah,
you're
but I'm saying, then I'm saying physician, because I feel like
Right.
somebody right,
So
so.
I'm not arguing
okay.
the physician part, I'm
Okay.
just arguing the with the experience with twin birth.
Well, except that if you go to a family medicine doctor that doesn't do twins, they're not gonna know how to.
But they're not, that's
Do
not an appropriate
monitoring.
consult then.
Well,
Because it says with someone knowledgeable and experienced with the indication to consult.
You could put the with hospital privileges part.
Okay, with
privileges.
hospital privileges, I would, yeah, okay,
I support.
all right, okay.
So I'll just direct
And
you real
cesarean
quick
delivery.
to your definition of consult.
Could we say with cesarean, how about with hospital cesarean privileges? How about
For
that?
surgical
Surgical.
And it says who's
No, I'd say
experienced.
cesarean, because that's never gonna change. That's what you do.
Is that a specific criteria for being credentialed with the hospital?
Yeah, I mean, you have
could
to
have surgical
privilege,
privileges
yeah,
and not do
right, not do
cesarean, you know, not do C-section.
What were you gonna say, Heather?
So I just want to make sure that it's clear that your intent is that the physician in this particular case would also be required to have the experience and knowledge about the indication for consult. So
Because
that's how
already
you would
just the
be,
framework for that.
that's how you would be reading that definition of consult in this context.
So that's understood, it is what you're saying.
That's what
based
I'm
on the
asking,
con-
what your intent is.
Yes.
That's what you're
That's
wanting.
what the rule says. I feel like we could use the language that we had used for our other specific consult, which is breach. And that says consult for breach presentation after 36 weeks must be with a physician who provides cesarean delivery. So if we want to have some consistency,
that's fine.
it could be with a physician who
Sure.
provides cesarean delivery. And with that, I think that covers all the bases that we're going for.
Great.
And we could probably just copy that also to the mono-di twins.
I think it wouldn't be consult with twin delivery, I think it would just be consult with twins, must be.
I mean, we could just say consult. We could get
consult must be with a
Yeah.
physician.
You,
Delete.
yep.
Twin. Yeah, perfect.
We did that fast.
This is hilarious. The primary is going to be the same.
Well,
I mean, I don't have any problem
You know, I
with wanting
just
to look further
I need
into
to
it.
look, because it's interesting, because I was, even just in a very, very quick scan I was doing, it's kind of all over the place, because I
Yes.
think even in more up-to-date stuff, it suggests that it's being done, you know? So I don't know.
Well, and I feel like obstetrics is a really tricky place, because even when we find that something isn't evidence-based, getting it out of practice, if they're already doing it, is horrendous. I mean, like, electronic fetal monitoring comes to mind, like you see, you know?
Just, let's say.
Yeah, just for an example, this thing that we feel hasn't been evidence-based for like 30 years, we're still just gonna do it routinely.
Okay, well, we can't, I mean, the problem is that having evidence for outcomes on these things that we've been doing forever is actually really difficult.
Sure.
And so,
Well, and also, like, I feel like maybe it's just me, but I like to collect data. And it's hard to not collect the data if I have the tool. And I mean, that's also evidence, like the Canadian midwives they have one credential and they can do home birth center and hospital birth. Like, even if you, like, match the people giving birth in each place, the midwives use more tools depending on the setting. Like, so, like, that's just human. If you have a tool that you can reach, you reach for it. Unfortunately.
but there's also some inherent bias in who's going where, too. I mean, there just is.
Yeah, but even, like, if you match, like, risks as much as you can, like, the midwives,
I know, but you can't, I mean, that's the problem, is you just can't. I mean, because
I mean, there's also,
we have
like,
enough inherent bias in what we do and how we consult and how we, give our planning. I mean, I guess unless it were purely strictly randomized, which it's never going to be.
Right.
You're always going to have a higher risk population.
But I mean, even if, like, I have a Canadian midwife friend who will say, like, they realize this is a thing in themselves that they do. If they have the tool, they reach for it.
Use it. So are we done with this part?
I think so.
Okay.
So are you guys, do you want to resonate with this and March, look at it one more time?
I feel like there's...
So we can make absolutely sure we have everything here, because you want us to look at
Just
Maria,
that
right?
Proteinuria, we should look
So
at.
bring it back in March?
I don't know if we need to reach you over all these things
No.
again.
One more time.
Maybe we could. Spend a few more hours on it.
There were, like, a couple little...
Oh, the lettering is wrong on the page that you're looking at. It goes A, B, C, D.
I don't have the thing where we said that. Oh, there it is.
Isn't that how the alphabet is?
So we're moving on to number 5,
Yeah.
Yeah.
items for board action.
No action?
This is Sylvie, you do not need that, we put that there in case you wanted to make a vote on adopting proposed rules today, but
Okay.
you didn't finish because you want to do some more research, so there was a holding spot in case you did. So you can move
There was
on. Sorry.
small errors, but I will get them. I will
Okay.
find you comment again.
So number
Wait, can you visually show me where we wound up with diabetes
Yes.
again? I'm sorry. What?
I'd be happy to.
So,
I think we left it.
gestational diabetes requiring medication.
So here's where I
Either
have
oral or
it,
insulin
Yeah.
is transferred.
on the documents, so where
It's
it doesn't get
transfer.
mixed.
And then,
So
No,
Very
it's she's,
Gestation,
Maria
it's
switched
under
over, sorry.
antepartum transfer, right?
Yes.
Okay.
and then,
Let's make sure it's on this
I
document.
know,
Very
hold on, Maria
important.
switched the screen over, Sandy.
I know, but I can still read it.
Well-managed gestational diabetes.
There we go.
So it's transfer pre-existing Gestational diabetes requiring oral medications.
And that is transfer, wait, that's antepartum.
That's
Antepartum.
Okay.
And that's known as bad.
What's the intent regarding H on antepartum consult, gestational diabetes, or blood glucose dysregulation well controlled? I'm not arguing it at all. What is the
I
intent?
think you wanted it.
You guys realize you spent
I
several
wanted
meetings.
Okay.
That's my
But who's it?
recollection.
I mean,
Because
like
I'll take it
7
out.
full
No, I don't
meetings.
want to take it out either, but I'm just trying to understand what you would do with that. What would you do with it?
I don't know. I don't want to have to do it. There's a
Yeah,
lot
that
of
sounds
midwives
terrible.
who don't want to have to do it.
Silka? Summit.
I totally agree.
What
If we can control it with diet and exercise, and we're now monitoring.
I think the
blood
problem
sugars.
is that we have seen some really poor control on the outside that was described as good control. And I think that's where my concern was coming in, that it's not being adequately recognized as what's not good control.
Great. So my question is that an education piece or is that a legislative piece? Should we be educating midwives better as to what control looks like, or should we be legislating?
I think until you educate, you need to legislate. So that's maybe what my intent was. Because I think that there is education out there, right? And it should have already been in place. It's not like this is a new condition. But we were seeing a lot of really sketchy management of diabetes that I felt like was poor enough that you need to legislate for better evaluation of it. I guess that's what my intent was.
So you want me to call you every time somebody has gestational diabetes?
And not just me, but the other 175 of us.
I guess this is it doesn't say who you have to do it with except somebody who's familiar with it. But I guess so maybe, I'm just trying to I'm trying to go back just because this is tough. But, we were seeing fasting glucoses consistently above 100.
And I think that was completely an education piece because people weren't, I've seen this too, and I think that midwives weren't always understanding the importance of separating fasting from postprandial values. And so I do think that is an education piece that midwives often need, especially midwives who have been practicing for a long time and haven't had the opportunity for updated
So maybe
training.
well, so I think here's the issue is, how do you tease out those midwives who don't have the education and aren't pursuing it and are continuing to practice in this vacuum that's unsafe? And so I think that's one of the ways that you determine inadequate practices, right? Is if you require that they at least talk with somebody who has more familiarity with the problem.
Which could be another midwife.
Right, in this case, it could be another midwife. And so you know that fastings above 100 are not acceptable, but somebody else does not realize that. And so somebody's going to come to you and say, I have this diabetic, and I'm managing with diet and exercise, and I'm checking her fasting once a week, and it's been 105, and I'm checking her postprandial twice a week, and it's been 132 each time. Right? So I guess that's what I'm sorry I had to talk this out again, but I guess that's what I was trying to get at with this.
That just feels, I don't know.
It feels like legislation in the masses for the misgivings of a few.
Right. Especially, we have a licensed midwife who's, also...
A nutritionist.
Yeah.
And she might lose her...
Who's she gonna consult with? Why does she need to consult?
Well, because you're...
She's the one we're sending everybody to.
Okay, but it is a high-risk pregnancy condition. In every term, it's a high-risk pregnancy condition, right? And if it's poorly controlled, it's a higher-risk pregnancy, or I'll just say it's a high-risk pregnancy condition. And so is it ever wrong to have to talk about what's happening with somebody?
I think that something you're saying is really the key, is that it's poorly controlled. And I feel like we have, if you're well controlled with diet and exercise, that's one thing.
Right.
And if you require meds, that's something very different. And what we really want to legislate is the piece in the middle, where it's not
People
well
think
controlled.
they're well controlled, but it's not.
Well, and not even that, but just somebody who is not well controlled.
or who's not evaluating it correctly.
Like you're
I don't
trying
know that
with
we can
diet and
legislate
exercise
that.
and it's not being well controlled.
Yes,
And
I
then-
feel like maybe.
And then you consult and try to figure out
Exactly.
what else can I do, how else can I tweak it.
I
Yeah.
guess, are we having a bunch of bad outcomes because of this? You know, I'm thinking like, I was in Austin for 10 years, and our glucose test was people came in and we did fasting, and then they went and they had breakfast at the Magnolia Cafe, which is around the corner, pancakes, whatever, and they came back and we did it 2 hours postprandial, and like, that's not a standard test. That was, you know, some years ago. And yet, I don't feel like we missed a bunch of people and had like these like macroscopic babies that blood sugar crashed afterwards and stuff like that. You know, it's just like not how we should do this, but it's just an example of, okay, in the absence of this, I haven't been on the board when we've seen these kind of cases, so I'm asking like, has it happened a lot? Like babies had to be like, you know, that there was bad outcomes.
I hate anecdotal, the thing is I hate anecdotal stuff, and so unfortunately that's what I'm coming with. And so the last, I can think of it within the last 18 months of a death of a baby who was a missed diabetic for sure, like no question it was a missed diabetic. And then the last transfer that we had in, which was an antepartum, was a screening protocol that was really, I'll say, not evidence-based and was inadequate at the point. And so I don't know. So anecdotally, there are problems with what's being done in the community for evaluation and management of diabetes.
And I think that is a professional organization issue. I don't think it's a
It
legislative.
is, but I think at this time, it's still a high-risk issue in pregnancy, and by definition, these are supposed to be low-risk patients. And so, I think that there's some way we need to capture those people with a high-risk condition that are, being missed as a risk out because they're not being treated adequately. It's a high-risk condition, it is. This is a low-risk activity that we're trying to promote, and this is a high-risk condition. And so there has to be some way to, make sure that patients with a higher risk condition are not being
I just think that there's
mismanaged.
other conditions that could be considered similarly that aren't in here, like AMA, advanced maternal age. And we're not explicitly drawing that out. We're expecting the midwives to know and monitor and treat according to practice standards that are community standard driven.
But
The research on that, though,
it's less,
it's not as risky, and the line is not clearly delineated.
I have to
Advanced
agree.
maternal age isn't a disease process. It's just more of a condition, and then all these other things could come on top of that.
That was just the one that came off.
Yeah.
But
As long as Wendy's willing to accept our.
I know, okay,
Let's keep it.
it's nice for us, and we can if we can consult with each other. That's still-
I do think it, because honestly, I think part of it is a concern that there's no mandated education on this,
Well,
right?
not on this specific topic, but
Right.
there is mandate on continuing education.
I get it, but
Yeah.
this in particular is a high-risk diagnosis that this is going to come off so badly, and I'm sorry, that we are allowing to be, considered for out-of-hospital management.
Right, we've
So-
decided that in this particular condition, it's low enough risk.
Right, and so if we can assure that it is well managed and not inadequately managed because of insufficient knowledge.
Well, and maybe if that's something that you are seeing more of anecdotally, that's something to recommend
Right.
to professional organizations.
Right.
For targeted.
Totally, sure. And it is something that, right, we know that diabetes is more common now, and so we do need it. And so until we can be assured that all midwives are adequately, engaged and knowledgeable about it, then I feel like it's a high-risk condition that we need to make sure is managed, appropriately.
So you're no longer questioning yourself about why?
No, I'm not. Thank you, Wendy.
That was a nice chat.
I do a lot of that.
Okay.
Okay.
Any more discussion on rules? Okay, so we'll have it on our next agenda for March 19th. And then we'll talk about rules one more time. We'll also have items for board action. Because if you finalize rules at the next meeting, you can then vote on proposed. Okay?
Okay.
All right, so then you are on item number 6.
All right, public and interested parties feedback.
You should have a script on your blue, second page of your blue, I do believe.
Yes. Okay, at this time, the Board of Direct Entry Midwifery will hear public interested parties' feedback. Members of the audience, please wait until you've been recognized by the chair. Once recognized, please state your name and affiliation to the board for the record. Okay. We have Scott Edwards. No, you're the HLO. Lisa, so.
Did you?
What?
I actually just have like one comment that I would like to make.
Can you come up so we
Sorry, I
can
didn't read the whole
get the recording, sorry.
Hi. Hello. My name is Lisa Solfridge. I am actually a traditional midwife in Oregon. Going over all of this, the only thing that's speaking to me right now that I'd like to mention is the indication for transfer antepartum, listing transverse presentation of a first twin. I feel like that's very undefined as to where antepartum. And does this mean that somebody who is 32 weeks should be transferred because it's listed as antepartum? We know that babies, even twins, can change position at any point, even up to labor. I completely agree with it being a transfer criteria. If labor starts in baby, it's still transverse, of course, but having it be an antepartum is my concern. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Silka Akerson, and I'm a licensed direct entry midwife and the executive director of the Oregon Midwifery Council. And I'm so excited you all are this far into this process. It really does. I definitely agree with Lisa's comment, and that's the position of the Oregon Midwifery Council, that there needs to be clarification or moving that to just some way of understanding that there are lots of points in pregnancy where a transverse presenting twin is not considered. Mostly, I think you resolved, so I guess I should back up. Colleen Forbes and Celeste Curzy and I have been going around to each of the regions to do a presentation about the new rules and make sure that people are really clear about them because so many changes happen. And in that process, there have definitely been a couple of problems that have come up that aren't things that I recognized during the process, but most of them you've already addressed. The biggest one was active cancer. It's actually come up in reality 3 times since the rules went into effect, because there are a lot of people who have a history of cancer, which was not totally on my radar. I think you landed on a place where that's going to clarify that. The other one was the place you've already talked about, which is the gestational diabetes needing insulin or oral medication as a transfer getting left off. And I just wanted to add that my memory also is that you all had agreed that that gestational diabetes requiring insulin or oral medication was an indication for transfer. The one that didn't get brought up is it's 332-025-0021-7. It's about the records that are required when a midwife is transferring care. And I think we all have the same intention, which is that we really want receiving providers to receive the records that they need. But there was a great deal of concern about the way that it's currently worded, specifically naming each item, because midwives' experience is actually that most hospitals don't want all of that and are often frustrated and rejecting when they're giving all of that. Many hospitals say they want a transfer summary form and labs. Many hospitals say they want, like each hospital has its own idea of what they want, and midwives are concerned that they're going to be put in a position where they're trying to give the whole thing, not able to give the whole thing, and then they're liable for not having given the whole thing. So I think there needs to just be a little bit of rethinking about that the midwife is responsible for like offering something at a minimum and offering anything else that the hospital wants, including this, but this requirement is actually putting midwives in a position where they're not actually able to comply with the rule. Because many hospitals literally say, no, we only want blah, blah, blah. Then,
Sammy, you're making, sorry to interrupt, you're making notes of all the
Yes,
things.
I am.
Okay. And so, just so everybody understands, we've already done with the rules for today.
Yeah.
So Sammy's making notes of everything that Silka's saying for what you can talk about when you come back on March 19th.
Yeah. So those were the only like old problems. In terms of things you all were talking about today, I actually think that the VBAC consult should be with a hospital provider specifically, because I think the quality concerns that we've had come up the most are actually about people. One of the key things that they're about are people not understanding what their parallel options would be in a hospital setting. And I think that that's one of the main ways that that can be provided for.
So you're talking about, instead of the physician with the cesarean,
Well, you said
That was for
physician-
twins.
They said that, so they said physician
she's
with
talking about
certain experience for breaches and twins, but not for for the VBAC consults. So for the two categories of VBAC that are consults, I think that
those should be with the,
a physician.
Not a physician or a midwife?
Or physician, yeah.
I mean, somebody with a hospital.
Someone with a hospital
Yeah,
privileges.
yeah, okay.
Because that's actually the key concern that I have, actually in all three of those categories, is people thinking, like when people have the misinformation that their only options are inherently a cesarean in the hospital or a home birth. And when they don't have the information that there are VBAC options in the hospital as well, or when they don't have information about what VBAC in the hospital looks like, so that they're actually making a decision based on the full set of options that they have.
So are you saying consult with a provider who has hospital privileges? Or
Yeah.
a doctor?
A provider that has hospital privileges, because the CNM would be totally adequate, just like they know what their hospital option is.
For all VBACs or for VBACs?
For the VBACs that you have as a consult requirement. Then there's just two more things. When you were having the discussion about well-controlled gestational diabetes, this is actually a key area of quality assurance concern for us. Even though we've had multiple rounds of continuing education about this, there are still people who think that someone is well managed when they're really not well managed. So I think this is an excellent place for a consult. And I think it's just another check and balance. It's really appropriate that it can be with another midwife, but it just means that there's another layer of verifying that what I think is well controlled, you also think is well controlled. So I know that it totally makes sense that some of you would think that that's excessive. I just know in terms of our kind of quality assurance reviews, this is actually one of our key areas of concern. And then the only thing that I just really wanted to object to is proteinuria as a consult. And that is because I feel like most of the things that it could turn out to be, or all of the things that it could turn out to be, are already in consult or transfer criteria, but the midwife really needs to be able to evaluate that. And there's transient proteinuria in pregnancy that may or may not turn out to be something, and the midwife needs to be able to evaluate that herself. And there also is proteinuria that's about a urinary tract infection, and the midwife needs to address the urinary tract infection and see if the proteinuria goes away. I don't think, I would be, one thing I experience about the rules as someone who I think practices in a pretty reasonable way is that I almost never brush up against them. I basically don't have to think about them because they're logical, because it's a normal way to practice. But I would brush up against that on a significantly frequent basis. Because if you're doing dipsticks regularly, especially because these are not, it's not a super accurate screening tool, you'll, see a protein this time, not see a protein that time. And I want to be able to evaluate what this is. I want to be able to see, this person had protein last time and this protein this time, I'm going to run some labs. And then if those labs are abnormal, then I'm going to consult or transfer appropriately depending on what's the result of those labs. I really don't want to be in the position of having to consult every time that comes up.
So, I'm sorry, for clarification, proteinuria is an abnormal test result. It's not a disease process in and of itself. It's a symptom of an underlying condition.
It's a potentially abnormal test result. It's also, you can also have proteinuria that is incidental.
Okay, so it could be incidental or it could be a sign of an underlying issue, which could be many different things.
I mean, this is Wendy, and we have not written this at all, and that would never be the way that it would be written at one time, so that, just so you are sure that a one-time 2+ protein dip is not a consult. I mean, so I think give us an opportunity to flesh it out a little bit.
I will just say, before you flesh it out, I think this is an area where you need to understand that midwives need to be able to assess it, and they're going to assess it by, looking for signs of a urinary tract infection, treating that if necessary, doing a clean catch, doing other labs, and I don't think that this isn't functionally an issue. And then the last thing, which is not about the rules, which I just wanted to put on your radar because you all have been meeting monthly for so long that I think you might have forgotten. And some of you have been meeting monthly the entire time you've been on the board, but the Board of Directors for Midwifery did not always meet monthly. And the stated intent was to revert to, I think it was every 3 months after, I can't remember, 3 or 4, after the rulemaking was done. And I just want to put that on your radar again because it really makes the commitment level for people who are considering being on the board very different, especially when we're going to eventually have to fill the position again. Wendy has been extremely gracious about being here on a monthly basis in an extremely busy schedule. And I just want to put it on your radar that eventually moving down to a normal board meeting schedule might make it more feasible to fill.
I think the staff would enjoy that also.
Yeah, I'm in. I'm all in.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so this is Sylvia again. We are on item number 7. You should have a script in front of you that you can read, and then we will take a little bit of a break. It should be on white paper. There you go.
We'll do this before we take a break?
Well, you'll read it. The executive session.
The Board of Direct Entry Midwifery will now meet in executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660-F and ORS 676.595 for the purpose of considering information related to investigation cases exempt from public disclosure at 10:55 a.m. on February 27th, 2020. Where representative of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are required to leave the room. Are there any representatives of the news media in the audience?
No.
Are there ever?
Yes.
Yeah?
We have had it, yes.
Okay, no. Recognizing there's no news media in attendance, all other audience members are asked to leave the room, please, during the executive session. We will return to open session before taking any final action or making any final decisions.
Okay. Script, it's on the part of the white.
Got it.
Okay.
Board of Direct Entry Midwifery will now exit executive session and reconvene open session at 11:53 a.m. No final decisions were made and no votes were taken in executive session. Members of the audience are welcome to return and representatives of the news media may once again report all board discussions and actions.
Okay, let's
Give
get
time for
Maria
people to get settled.
Yeah, and get Maria switching recordings over. Up there.
Oh. Okay, the other one's good.
Okay. Okay, so we're back in regular session. It's 11:54. And the door needs to be open. Oh, it is open. It's just propped open with the little key. It's not. Maria can't reach the thing without standing up on the stair. And there's nobody that was, the other two public members leave?
So I'm not sure, I can go check.
Yeah, we checked real quick, I just don't want
I
them
would
to,
guess so.
I'm assuming something, so I just want to double check. Yesterday, we had a board meeting that had lots of people. That was all full.
What was it for?
Advanced esthetician?
What was the hot topic?
Gone.
They're all gone, okay. Well, we're on recording, so we'll talk about that later.
Okay. So
We're on, sorry, this is Sylvie, we're on item number 8.
items for board action.
This is Kelsey, and I move that in case 20-9507, that we open an investigation.
This is that, I second.
So now we'll vote. Wendy?
Aye.
Christine? Aye. Beth?
Aye.
Lynette?
Aye.
Kelsey?
Aye.
Meredith? Aye. Appears to have passed.
So
Anything else?
Yeah, so now you're on item number 9.
Other board business?
Okay, so we have March 19th. We will again discuss rules.
I won't be here.
Okay.
Won't be here
Oh,
Neither will I. It matters.
well,
It's
one,
spring
no,
break.
that doesn't matter. Do we need to move?
It's spring break, but the next week was spring break for us.
Kind of.
Kind of both.
Kind of both.
Do you guys want, oh my God, I'm gonna kill you. Do you want to go the Thursday before, which is the 12th?
Not really.
12th of March.
I won't be here then either.
Do we want to skip March and go to April?
We leave.
Leave the country?
Yes.
Leave the country
Yeah.
for March.
Well, can we, this is Wendy, if we do that, would it be possible to sort of get this case started if we,
What case?
the one we're opening, so that we don't lose 2 months? I mean,
It's open.
I know it's open, but,
Oh, well, that'll give us time to subpoena records and
Okay.
all
all
the
right.
stuff that we need to
maybe
do.
we'll- okay.
Is everybody comfortable with not meeting in March? So your next meeting would be April 16th. Comfortable?
Sure.
Gives you a month to not have to come see our beautiful faces.
Okay, April 6th.
So April 16th. So we will cancel the March 20th meeting.
I have an exam that day.
Ooh, Lordy.
I just got to that page on my paper calendar.
There's a midwifery conference that day that I.
Oh, let's totally move it. So how about the 9th?
March. No.
Oh,
Yes, April.
How about April 9th?
you could do that.
I can do that.
It's Passover.
I'll bring
It's a
matzah.
holiday.
Is everybody comfortable with it?
Are you okay
Moving
with
to
that?
April 9th?
Yes.
I'm Jewish as well, but I guess, not to be disrespectful in any way. But I will bring
Yeah, I mean,
matzah.
I observe that holiday.
But is it, what day, is that the first?
Well,
I have no idea.
I think the Seder technically is Tuesday, the evening of April 7th, right, is when the holiday
Thank you for
starts.
The evening of the 8th.
Or the evening of the
And
8th.
people do 2
They do
Seder's
tend
in this country, but
So do you take the 9th off?
what's that?
Do you take the 9th off?
I mean, no. If somebody's having a baby, I don't usually take it off, so. It won't be a long meeting, right? It'll be a.
It'll be a regular board meeting, so it'll include all your stats and everything. It'll include the binder, which we always include the binder. And it will include your final, hopefully, adoption of proposed rules. So I don't think it would be that long of a meeting. But we can also switch it to the 2nd of April if that's better for you.
I won't be back yet.
So the 9th,
Okay.
or,
Sorry. That's fine. I mean, I can do Seder on the first night, and then we'll be done by the time of,
are you sure?
as far as hosting, yeah. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so we're canceling March 19th, Maria getting all this, and then we're moving the April meeting from the 16th to the 9th. And so, again, Maria, the March 19th was supposed to be a regular board meeting, so that's the one that has all the reports and everything. So that will be shifted to the April 9th meeting. Okay. And at that April 9th meeting, we will, like I said already, we'll do the rules, all your reports, binders, and anything else that you can think of now or between now and then that you want on the agenda.
And Sammy's going to send us the proteinuria.
I just want to express some gratitude for the way the agenda was today. I think it really helps with including our licensees and the public if we have all of the public part first.
Yes.
So I just
Yes.
want to, I would love if we could continue to have a similar format so we don't take up people's whole day sitting out there waiting for executive session to be over.
We try to do it that way sometimes. There's certain things you need
Sure.
to know before we get to a certain spot.
I
So, yes,
totally
yeah.
understand that, but I just wanted to.
No, and we always want something here to be able to participate, so yeah.
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 Great.
And this is Wendy, can I, if I have any other additional protein, I mean,
Just email them to Sammy. Everybody's got Sammy's information, right? And if you don't, for some reason, her cards are in the back by the door. Just remember to not email each other.
So you email Sammy and then she sends it out to us, so
Yep.
you'll have the same information.
Absolutely. Okay? And then you'll also get an email from Doreen when she gets that information out there for you to review before the meeting. How long would you like, how long before the meeting? Because you don't want it like too long before the meeting because you'll read it and not remember it. But how long before the meeting do you want that stuff?
I think at least a week is nice.
So a week before the meeting, so let's say have Doreen send it on April 2nd. And that will give you, it'll be the Thursday before.
Is there any possibility of getting it a little bit earlier and then getting a reminder on April 2nd?
That's up to you guys. You tell us what you want.
2 weeks?
Sure. 2 weeks and then 1 week? Okay, if you haven't done this yet, do it.
So have her send it out March 26th. Okay, anything else? All right, you have
What
a,
a lovely champagne.
I know, right?
Board of Directors Midway Free meeting is adjourned at 12:01 p.m.